Love. Some would say it took a backseat when the pandemic forced us apart. As a family-run and proudly Canadian-owned company, Charm Diamond Centers saw the need to bring us together with tales of love and created the Canadian Love Map podcast. Since then, we've shared hundreds of real, uplifting stories that prove love conquers all. So thank you for listening. We couldn't do it without you. And remember, love starts here.
When we first started dating, I was also just starting to come out as well.
Right.
So I wasn't fully out of the closet. So
Yeah.
it's also going on the journey of finding really like true love and also being my true authentic self.
Hi, I'm Nancy Regan. Today's love story belongs to Paul and Cori. In spite of living in different countries, they found each other online almost 20 years ago. Since then, they've faced challenges and overcome obstacles, but they've also shared a lot of love with each other and with an international audience. Paul and Cori, I'm so excited to talk to you today.
We're
Thank you for
so
having
happy to
us.
be here.
There is just love woven through this whole story of yours, isn't there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of love.
I think so.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you met.
You go for it.
Well, we met in 2003 on a website called gay.com. I was in Bermuda and Paul was in London, Ontario. And I guess it was love at first
Talk.
talk.
Yeah. It was before, we always joke about when we first met, it had just sort of been the end of there used to be this thing, and this is embarrassing to say the name of it, but I did not create this. It was called Manhunt. So
Oh my gosh.
we met on sort of the first opening of like really internet
dating.
So we were sort of the first internet dating couple in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Wow. And what was that opening up like? What was your initial conversation?
Well, Cori, I have to tell you, Cori found me. So
I said hi first.
He said hi first. And one of my rules was if you didn't have a picture, I wouldn't give any time of day to you. And Cori, because there's a lot of people that are, like a little sketchy on some of those sites. So one of my rules was, no picture, no kind of interest really. And then Cori didn't have a picture, which I thought was interesting. And something in my heart just said to listen. And I, that inner voice just said, pay attention. And I did. And, here we are today.
So your initial conversations were on the phone.
Yeah, no, it was actually, we met online. So it's like a chat room kind of. So
Okay.
It was through chatting, through typing. And it was right at the precipice, like really of internet dating. So it was right after, it was sort of all new. Like we didn't really know what we were doing. And
okay, so how did that blossom? How did the conversation blossom?
Yeah, well, I basically didn't believe that Cori would sort of kind of stay in touch the way that, the first meeting was amazing. We talked for, I think, probably like 3 hours
we talked at first online
for 3 hours or
and
so.
then I called you.
Yeah, and then Cori called me, which I sort of said he wouldn't do, and then he did. And then we just sort of started talking literally every day from that point forward. And
for multiple hours a day.
Yeah, so for at least an hour or two every day, literally. And that went on for months. And then we actually ended up meeting probably a couple of months later. It was in August that we met the first time, and we had a very romantic getaway.
Where?
At Langton Hall in Cambridge,
Ontario.
And it still holds a very special place in our hearts today.
We've gone back there for an anniversary, but it's one of the most beautiful properties. If anybody ever gets a chance to go there, Langton Hall, it's a Relais and Chateau property.
Okay, so I'm so curious to know, what was it like actually laying eyes on one another in person after you had already fostered this relationship?
Obviously, there was a bit of nervousness, but it just flowed organically. Like it was.
Yeah, like the thing that was really interesting, I always say that when you meet someone online, it's an interesting experience because the chemistry's there, obviously, but when you get together, it's almost like
Catching up
you have to catch up, you know. So I sort of
to reality.
I've gone on some dates, obviously, before Cori, and I kind of knew that. And the real telltale is when you get together. But I was so nervous. I know you were so nervous, and that's a good sign. And we had an hour drive to get to Langton Hall from London, Ontario. It's about an hour drive. And I remember just, you know, that excitement too. It was just, you know, I fell in love with Cori really the first sound, really, when we talked. And then it was interesting to get to Langton Hall because it was so, you know, it was sort of romantic and also scary, but it was actually really beautiful because Cori was very romantic and arranged this gorgeous loft to be that space that had a fireplace. We had wine, we had beer. I brought beer and wine just in case we needed extra booze. And it was magical, really. I mean, that's the truth. And it was so. I mean, it's a very fancy place too. So I was sort of feeling really extra special there. And Cori paid.
That's extra special.
Yeah, right.
So where did the relationship go from there? Because Corey's in Bermuda, you're in London. What happened?
Well, I was also like in Toronto a lot, so he would come down to Toronto on weekends or
Yeah, so
as much as we could.
It was kind of a funny thing because we would sort of arrange it where I would go to Toronto. You would come in for like for work and do some things in Toronto and sort of set up basically like a kind of like an Airbnb situation there back then. And anyways, I would come in from London because I had to work sort of, you know, 40 hours a week to pay for things. And I would drive in and I would be so excited. But we did that for a lot of months and months and months, probably about 6 months.
Yeah, it was really hard just with the distance.
Yeah.
Like we went sometimes months without seeing each other. So that was...
Yeah, it was hard. But the thing that was really romantic about that is it made you really, when you were together, made you really appreciate each other. And that was something that was really special. And the thing that was really also a part of this was we had arranged to live together. I think it was in January of that first, like I guess it was 6 months afterwards.
2004.
Yes. Yeah. So anyways, we ended up moving to Toronto about 6 months in, and we took the plunge to live together. And it was one of those things where we both decided to sort of spend time in Toronto as our hub. But you went back to Bermuda a lot as well. Mm-hmm. We were doing that as well because of your job there. And I love those moments in Toronto. We had about 2 years sort of that.
Yeah.
And it was very special. Yeah.
And just being from two countries too, it was a dance. It was a lot to maneuver. A lot of time not spent together, which was really hard at the beginning. Thankfully, we don't really have to do that anymore.
Yeah, thank God.
Now you're stuck together in lockdown.
As you know, right? Yeah.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, your description of how you felt when you were together is so lovely. What challenges did you face in terms of how the world reacted to you as a couple?
That's a good question. Well,
that's a great question.
The thing that's interesting about, as you may or may not know, if you're listening to this, you don't have the visual, but Cori is Black and I am white. And, that alone is a huge sort of, I think just it's an expanse of a lot of things that we learned about each other from a space of really complexity that was wonderful and beautiful and cultural and deep and rich. And then, the challenge of that was also Bermuda. So I'd never been to Bermuda. So I didn't really know what that looked like or, the culture of Bermuda really. So I learned a lot in those early first 6 months. And then I ended up going to Bermuda and learned about a place I really knew nothing about. And it's so funny with the song Bermuda, Bahamas, Come On Pretty Mama. That's pretty much all I knew about Bermuda. And what I learned, which was so interesting, is the richness of Bermuda, from a culture that is so deeply rooted with Britain. And, some good, some bad, some challenges, of course, and how complex it is in terms of business and finance.
And there's also the factor too of when we first started dating, I was also just starting to come out as well. So I
Right.
wasn't fully out of the closet.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
Yeah.
it's also going on the journey of finding really like true love and also being my true authentic self. So it was kind of hard maneuvering that just with my family and whatnot. My family was
Right.
not super accepting at the beginning. It has been a process over the years.
Well said.
Mhm.
It's been a process, but yeah, those were very hard challenges at the beginning.
They were. I forgot how deep and really, quite frankly, complicated that could be at times too. It was complicated at the
Yeah.
beginning. Just the dance of the secret, right? The dance of the coming out of that secret space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
So,
emotions. Yeah.
so the first time, Paul, that you went to Bermuda,
Mm.
Cori, did your family and friends know, or was that a secret, that visit?
Well, the first time Paul came to Bermuda, he stayed at the beautiful Elbow Beach Hotel.
Yeah,
Oh, I love
it
it.
was very special, Corey. I flew in on Air Canada and it was the most insane storm. So when I landed, if anybody's ever landed in Bermuda when it's really windy, you know it. And the runway's quite short. So I remember that sort of came into the storm. But then I woke up in the morning that day, that first morning, and it was the most beautiful hotel I think I've ever been to that overlooks the most gorgeous shore.
But he stayed there and didn't meet my parents,
Yeah.
nor any of my friends the first time. It was just us,
Yeah.
which was kind of, it's nice to get that love in and whatnot before actually having to deal with the real world and the reality of my coming out.
Yeah.
So you didn't meet my parents until when?
Well, I think it was I met your mom I think on the second trip. Um,
Yeah.
and then from that point forward we were just friends.
Yeah. We were just
Just
friends.
friends. And that was
Really good friends.
I
Yeah.
slept on the couch and that was interesting, kind of thing. But little did your mom know at that time.
Yeah.
Really, but that was sort of the way that it was, especially you have to keep in mind that was quite a number of years ago too.
So long ago.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
you were pioneers in some ways when you think about how closed-minded people were then.
Yeah.
Well, Bermuda is also it's a very Christian based country. I think that there are more churches in Bermuda per capita than anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So
And it's Christian fundamentalism, sort of
Christian
like a
fundamentalism,
little bit more
Right.
extreme.
right? And especially like back then, like
Yeah.
homophobia was rampant and stuff. So
Yeah. It was a big journey, let me say.
yeah,
For both of us.
huge.
Well, it speaks to the courage that it took and still takes. I'm not trying to downplay the courage that it takes some people now, but it really must have taken an amazing amount of fortitude for you to, as they say, come out of the closet and say, "This is who I am."
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a huge, I mean, for anyone that knows, anyone that's gay or been through the process of it, we also must keep in mind for those listeners that are listening, when we first, when we were children, I was born in 1977.
I was born in 76.
So it's important to remember the world. It was just, at the start of the AIDS epidemic or the HIV crisis, really. We grew up thinking that and told often that if you're gay, you're going to die of AIDS or HIV. And, we sort of were really scared in the closet sort of boys. I know we've talked about that. So we grew up in that. And then coming out of that, I told my mom, I sort of was forced out of the closet from my aunt, which I thank her for. She was like, "You're telling your mother now." And I thank her so much for that because it just pushed me in a way that I needed to be pushed so that we could just deal with it. And thankfully, it was really beautifully received.
You were 22, right?
No, I think I was actually I think I was about 18 when I told my mom, maybe 19. I think it's a little bit foggy. And then I told my dad actually 2 years later, and I told my mother not to tell my father. I needed some time to just do one at a time. Yeah. So she agreed, and that worked out well. So yeah. But I mean, it was a long process. To being gay is a really,
Well, it's like it's also like putting your toe in the pond, like
yeah, you have to dip in
dip
and
in, dip in, dip in, dip in. It's actually interesting. We were walking while we were driving. We were just at the grocery store yesterday. We were walking down the street. This little boy was walking down the street, and he couldn't have been more than 14 years old. And I don't want to, like, it's not really stereotyping, but you can tell that he was gay, and it was just so refreshing for me as a 45-year-old man to see that just these kids are coming out so much younger, which
liberated,
is they're
liberated.
so liberated. And we were just talking, just that would never happen for us at that age.
Yeah, no.
Ever.
Mm. And what about any shift that you've felt in the past, 15 months since the Black Lives Matter movement really got underway or took, full steam? What sort of shift have you felt in the world in the past year or so?
Well, that's a very excellent question. And there's been a seismic shift.
Mm.
There's been a shift in the way that I don't think, I know that we haven't discussed these issues like we've discussed over the last 15 years. The truth has just been laid bare. Like, it's honest, it's raw, it's authentic, and there's really no hiding from it anymore. And it's very liberating. And it's been very hard having to witness that as a Black person, but it's been needed.
Mm.
We've had to have these discussions and these conversations, and I just feel like we've just been sweeping it under the rug for far too long, and it's just at the forefront. Like, you can't deny it anymore.
One of the things that I wanted to let Corey obviously share that first. The first thing that comes to my heart is that it's been very challenging to watch and listen and see Corey actually going through what's been going on. So, it's for me, it's been harder to watch that space for Corey's challenge with just, I think, just the world of that past, right, coming into this moment. And the thing that I want to say that comes to my heart as well is just when I lived in Bermuda, because we did end up actually living in Bermuda. I actually sort of kind of I pushed that a lot when we were first together. After living in Toronto for 2 years, I then moved to Bermuda with Corey permanently for the first time. And the thing that was very interesting for me as someone that is white, living in a predominantly Black place was so beautiful in ways that I grew and understood so much that I was so ignorant in, actually. And I
Mm.
think a lot of times people that are white don't really have that experience. And I think for me, I'm one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life is actually live in Bermuda. And I think just seeing the beauty of a culture that is so rich in family and values and caring about it. It's a small island. It's 21 square miles. And I learned things by living there and being a minority, actually. And it was really powerful. So just to go to your question, it's been really challenging, I think, for so many people going through what's been going on. And seeing what police have done to people is just, I mean, there's no words for it. It's beyond words, really.
And it just seems like there's something every day. So
It's been a
just the
lot.
processing of that, it just keeps coming. It just keeps snowballing, and just witnessing, really, and being a witness to it it has been very difficult.
Yeah.
But also liberating as well.
And then throw in COVID.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. It's all too much, isn't it? But it seems to me that your love and your story is an amazing kind of counterbalance to all of that um, difficulty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, love, I always say, Dr. Maya Angelou always said that love liberates. And this is the thing, love builds bridges. And we were talking about that actually on our walk today. But, you know, I think that this is the thing with the times that we're in, is just, really coming back to the basics of just really, quite frankly, the heart and the soul, and living from the space of liberating the world with our love. And I think that's what we're living in right now, and that's my intention right now.
And I also feel so blessed to have him
Mm.
just in my life. Like this past year obviously has been so hard. Like a lot of people have divorced, separated, and whatnot, and
Yeah.
it's actually funny, like we spend so much time together, and we like, you're my best friend, like he's my
Yeah.
best friend, I enjoy his company. And I think like the thing that happened when like this whole COVID thing started is couples were spending so much time together, and after not having spent so much time together, so him and I doing this during COVID, it's kind of just like
We were well prepped.
we were very well prepped.
This podcast is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, Canada's largest family-owned jewelry store. They are proud to be putting love on the map, and the staff at Charm Diamond Centers are thrilled to be a part of your love story too. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. It feels also, though, that your loves, just speaking about your love on this podcast, or as you do so often in the world, is a balm on a lot of the troubles out there. It's like broadcasting your love is a really positive thing.
That's
Thank
sweet.
you for saying that.
That's very sweet. Yeah, that's, it's interesting, like just with what I do. And Cori's been such a huge stabilizing force for staying grounded, really. And it's emotional to be a public person. This is the thing that Cori has that's a huge asset to me, and I don't think I could do what I do without Cori. So we've been prepared, I think, for years to I've been public technically for 10 years, and I think the thing that these times have really done is, I think we've been prepared to be in them, is sort of my point in where we go from here. And I think love is really, my intention in everything that I do, as you know, is love. And, I think self-love in particular, and having, my dad with suicide, I think that it's really important to first love yourself. And this goes into the times that we're in. And I think that we're going into these deep dives within now, and love liberates.
Let's talk about that public life that you're referring to. And Paul, maybe you can tell our listeners about how your dad's death sort of triggered your music career.
Yeah, well, the it's such a big story, and I'm asked about it often. But the most important thing is that I always go to the date to start with. So it was March the 6th of 2011, and my father sadly took his own life. For those that may not know, and it was one of those moments that everything. My life is divided really into two parts, really, before that and after that. And the old me has had to figure out how to be the new me. And it was a moment where I could no longer really do what I did before, because I had to heal something that I never thought I would ever have to experience. And to do that, there's only one way that I could do that, was with God. I say that with humility. But from that space forward, I became someone that was asked to sing music for God. I mean, that's really the truth.
Cori, what's it been like to be part of the very cool experience of Paul's path to fame, as it were?
Well, at the beginning I was not a fan.
It's the truth of our story, right? Like,
come on, really?
Well, I'm an intensely private person, and I didn't even know that he was this amazing singer. I remember the first time he went to the studio and he recorded, and he obviously like allowed me to hear the music after. And I was like, wow, that's you? So he was hiding something from me for all those years. And
I wasn't playing, like, it's funny, I wasn't playing like
you,
any, I really didn't play
right.
any music, didn't play the piano, didn't really sing. Corey just thought it was a, a hobby
Right.
as such. But it's funny, after my dad died, when I brought that first, it was in 2011, I did a recording in September of 2011. And it was funny because I remember just putting the video up online and actually hitting the send button. And my mom, Corey, and myself, we were so scared to put this public truth out there.
And I was like, are you sure you want to do
We
this?
all just sort of looked at each other and were like, oh my God. And then, that moment sort of was.
And also too, like, he has been pulling me soft at the beginning, but I think that I was pulled into it kicking and screaming at the beginning.
He really was. It's funny. We haven't really talked about that too much publicly, which is funny. But
and there have also been a few instances like which have not sat well with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
I've had a couple of crazy fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You step into the big arena and that can happen for sure.
Yeah.
But this is the amazing thing. So your song, My Heart, has found its way into hearts literally around the world. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's sort of an interesting thing. So I had this vision when I was probably about 17 or 18 that I would write. And, for those that may or, been to a psychic or had that inner voice understanding, I was so clueless as to what that was really like. But I had an inner voice that was always sharing things with me as a kid that was confusing. And I had a moment where it was that you will write a quantum heart love song for the world. And I was very confused as a child when I heard that sort of inner voice tell me this. And when I wrote this song, the same inner voice, in my 30s said that this is the quantum heart love song. And I had no idea at the time. I wrote this actually probably around 2012, 2013, and then recorded it on my Love Expanding Love album, which was one of my first bigger ones. And it was released in 2014 from London, England, is where we were living at the time. And, it went out and it made its way essentially to Christiane Northrup, Dr. Christiane Northrup, who then actually, through a number of experiences, ended up sharing it to honor Louise Hay's life, essentially in San Diego, California. And it just sort of amplified it and just kept going. And it's used in hospitals and healing clinics and hospices and so many different ways. Anita Morjani uses it in her workshops and lectures, and it's all about placing your hand on your heart and really saying I love you to yourself, for yourself.
Well, it's the ultimate self-love song.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it people use it sort of almost as a spiritual practice, that song, some people. So it's been a big experience.
Put your hand on your heart and put your hand on your heart and say I love you and close your.
Yeah, I was going to say it's so much more than just a song, if you don't mind me saying that. And Louise Hay was the founder of Hay House Publishing, which, of course, has done many, many hundreds, probably thousands of spiritual books. But she was like the godmother of self-love. She really was the first person I ever heard talking about the importance of loving yourself. And I have this feeling that for many of us, we're much more in a place of self-loathing than self-love. And I remember being really uncomfortable, even with the phrase self-love. It's like, really? But I think it's because it's like, it's so far from where you are. It doesn't seem possible. Can we talk about how self-love factors into that song and your lives?
Well, what I'll share with you about, I love how you really set that up, because Louise Hay, really, quite frankly, the cornerstone is that um, when you love yourself, you heal your life. And she's very famous for a book called You Can Heal Your Life. And that's
Mhm.
sold over 55 million copies or more. God only knows how many now. So the thing that's very interesting is when you love yourself, she believed that you could heal your life, and not just believed it, but lived it. And her life was a dedication to healing the world, and that work continues on with thousands and thousands of teachers all around the world that teach that course that she actually based around that book. And I think we're learning more and more that when you really are honest about the world of today, we're actually our own worst enemy. We're horrible to ourselves. I
And to
know,
each other.
I've been horrible to myself, that self-loathing you mentioned. So I think what's interesting is we're living in a time where we're starting to take accountability for, really, quite frankly, our thoughts and the way that we use our words. And I think it's important when you start with those things, because words and thoughts have power and they create things, our lives. And how we think and feel about ourselves create the life and the experiences that we'll have. So when you love yourself, her whole model is based around the fact that you start basically healing your heart. And, I think that we're all growing up, so to speak, as, becoming able to admit that we're not always nice to ourselves,
Mhm.
And I think we've not really done that intentionally, but we were taught to basically be quiet, not have, that outward, just live privately within ourselves. But we're starting to share that outwardly now.
Well, you've shared it outwardly. You've traveled around the world with your music in general, but I think that song has been such an engine as well. I'm curious, Cori, what has it been like for you watching and traveling along with Paul while this is unfolding?
Well, the traveling, let me preface, is my favorite part. So it's been wild. It's been amazing, and it's been such a treat. And to get him to witness and watch him to do what he loves has been special. It's been very special. And it's also like, it's just, I'm immensely proud of him, watching him, what he does, and just how people relate to him. Like, people love him and he loves people. And I think the reason why they love him so much is because he comes from his heart. Like, he's such a heart centered person. Like, he would take the shirt off his back.
Yeah, it's funny how, all, I think that there's been such a huge movement with people, this, as you know, the stage is a funny place, and it creates a lot of egos.
Hmm.
So the thing that's so beautiful about those spaces is people tell you things that they have never told anyone else.
What is it about music that is such a portal for healing for you?
I say this with humility, but I think that what's really cool is that music, real music, comes from the heart, it comes from the soul, and the voice is how it gets out to people. And it goes back to Dr. Maya Angelou, who taught me that words have power. Louise Hay taught me that thoughts have power. And when you put them together, it's the heart and the soul in manifest that gets to reach the other heart and soul. And one by one, something happens. And music comes from the inside and it goes to the inside, and it bypasses the brain because it is a technology of the heart and the soul.
That is the most powerful description. I'm sitting here almost speechless, which for me is really saying something. Um, but thank you for that. No, it's so thought provoking. It's really beautiful, and I think we all can resonate with that because if you love music, you know that it has the ability to change your state.
Yeah.
It can change your mental state and your and the way your heart feels. Let's talk about what you love about Corey, Paul.
Hmm. Well, that's a very beautiful question and a big one. I love everything about the way that Corey, I think, is, someone once, I think it was one of my fans somewhere along the way, or a friend, that explained you as a tree.
Hmm.
And I think that, trees often just really remind us that we are strong, sturdy, stable, and we're able to handle storms at times. Like I really like the metaphor of the tree for Cori, and it, wisdom, year by year, just gradually growing. I really like that spiritual sort of analogy, and not to mention trees provide oxygen so that we have atmosphere and have life. So I like to sort of remind, myself, and just to share Cori as a beautifully powerful, strong, old, wise tree. And, I think the thing that I would also say about Cori is that the thing that he has taught me in my life, among many things, is to really make sure that you are impeccable with when you say you're going to do something, do it. I think a lot of times people waver on, you say something and don't do it. If you're gonna say something and you say you're gonna do it, you do it. And I think I used to not be so great at that. I think I wavered around, like a lot of us. And he reminded me that, if you say you're gonna do something, do it, and held me accountable actually for the things I said I was gonna do. And I think that's a really important thing. If you want to create a life, you have to be very good with that. So I thank Cori for that. And on top of all of that, he has the most beautiful heart.
What you just said, Paul, speaks about partnership to me, just a beautiful example of partnership. Cori, what do you love about Paul?
Well, I love that he is fiercely loyal. He's such a great friend. He's an amazing friend. And I love that he's a dreamer. And I just love the way that he carries himself. He carries himself in a way that you are impeccable with your word, and you just love people. And I love the way that you interact with people because you're just a good person, and he's wise, and he's also intensely funny. And it's just, I often say it's just interesting. Like, I feel like when I see him, I see just a little boy, and I see myself just as a little boy too. So it's like we're just like little boys, just meander through life together. Like he's 9, no, I'm 9 and you're 8, and we're just best friends.
Yeah.
Do you feel so lucky to have that?
I do.
100%.
It's the best thing in life is really when you start to figure out that you get to sort of just sit back a little bit more and relax and enjoy, even in hard times, when you have somebody to share life with. And relationships are a lot of work. I'll be the first to admit that.
Absolutely.
As anybody that's ever been in one for 18 years or more, it doesn't just happen, and it takes a lot of balancing and talking and communicating. And I think as a child, you don't really understand what that's like until you're in it. But what I love about, I always say I want to reach the front porch with Cori at the end of our life, and just to be able to sit on a front porch in a beautiful spot.
Yeah. And he's just such a beautiful man.
And it makes me want to cry. Sorry, that front porch image just makes me want to cry, because I really think that there's something about just being old, having lived a life. I want to live to get to that front porch and just sit back and go, we did it.
A friend of mine would call it your rocking chair man.
Yeah.
Good words. Good words.
He's also the kindest person you'll ever meet, which is a definitely added bonus.
That's the bonus. Well, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you were willing to share your love story with us today.
Well,
thank you for having us.
Nancy, the only person that I would ever do this for this intimate is you, because you're pretty damn amazing. So thank you for just doing what you do. And I'm really honored, actually, that you asked. So thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. If you love us, please subscribe and share. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter.